नमो तस्सा भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा संबुद्धस्सा नमो तस्सा भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा संबुद्धस्सा नमो तस्सा भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा संबुद्धस्सा इतिपिसो भगवारहं सम्मा संबुद्धो विद्याचरण संपन्नो सुगतो लोकविदु अनुत्तरो पुरिसदम्म सारथि सत्तादेव मनुष्याणां बुद्धो भगवाति नमो तस्स सम्मा संबुद्धस्सा स्वाकातो भगवता धम्मो संदिटिको अकालिको एहिपस्सिको वपनायको पच्छत्तं वेदितव्यो विन्नुहीति नमो तस्स नियानिकस्स धम्मस्सा सुपटिपन्नो भगवतो सावक संगो उजुपटिपन्नो भगवतो सावक संगो न्यायपटिपन्नो भगवतो सावक संगो सामीचिपटिपन्नो भगवतो सावक संगो यदिदं चत्तारि पुरिसयुगानि अट्टपुरिसपुग्गल एषा भगवतो सावक संगो आहुनेयो पाहुनेयो दक्षिणेयो अंजलिकरणीयो अनुत्तरं पुण्यक्षेतं लोकस्साति नमो तस्स अट्ट अर्य पुग्गला महासंगसा. Okay, so today's topic is about the fears. Of course, some time back also we started the discussion on these fears. And generally we think fears are bad. And of course, most of the fears are bad. They're not beneficial for us. It will make us weak. It will make us to lose confidence, and courage to say, face the world or face the situation. And thereby we can't give our best to our work or to our, say, our task or our say commitment. We can't give our best. We get inhibited by the situation, by the people, by the surroundings, because of this this lack of confidence, and that is because of the fears so that we develop in our mind towards the situation, towards the people, towards the task. In that way, most of the fears, most of the time, they are not beneficial. And the psychology of fears, why the fears arise, and say how they can be classified and how they can be handled. All these things, of course, many psychologists and doctors, psychotherapists, they are working on those things. Of course, they have discovered, they have found out so many solutions. Those things also we'll see to some extent. And the limitations also we'll see of those medical approach or the scientific approach. And the other approach is like, as we generally used to take up, like the religious approach. To religious approach also, there are some religious fears, of course, but they sometimes they help in overcoming some worldly fears. Some religious fears, if you develop, they help in overtaking or overcoming the worldly fears. The scientific approach, it will help you to use some scientific tools, some medicines, some techniques to overtake, to come out of these worldly fears. And the religious fears also will help to some extent, and the religious techniques also sometimes help to come out of some worldly fears. But it may sometimes, some religious fears, it may develop some other kind of fears, and it will again squeeze your energy. Again, it will make you to lose confidence. That possibility is also there. So, because of that limitation in the religious fears, in the religious approach to handle fears, so we should look into the right view approach also to handle fears. And of course, one has to progress very deeply, very authoritatively in right view to completely hit the source of all fears. But even the first step that you take in right view, it will have an authoritative, say, approach, authoritative move that you have taken to handle the fears, all kinds of fears. So, in many of the approaches, whether it is scientific approaches or these other religious approaches, so if you subdue one fear, the another fear may arise in the mind. That risk is very much there. But in this right view approach, it is like handling the things in an integrated way, with that overall perspective, with an authoritative way. In that way, we will see the fears, generally the bad fears, which will hinder our progress, will hinder our say happiness and confidence. It will increase our suffering. So how to handle them scientifically, how to handle them religiously, and also how to handle them with right view. So this we will see. And in addition to that, we will see what are the good fears also. What are some of the good fears that we can definitely we should nurture those good fears, understand them of course, and though they look like fears, they're not exactly like they are like negative. They are not horrible. They will not say destroy us. They will not take us to decline or suffering. Rather, they will take us towards the true happiness. So they are called good fears. And only in this right view approach, you can authoritatively know those good fears, and maybe you can nurture those good fears also. Those things also we will see. Of course, in the last talk, this Sunday talk, sometime back, maybe almost one month or 1.5 months back. So these good fears, bad fears, the same talk. The first part of it, we have seen some of the causes of these fears, and some scientific approach to these fears, and all these things we have seen. And some religious approach to handle fears also we have seen. And maybe a little bit of right view approach also we have seen. Today we will continue from that point, and then we will take up some intense fears or some irrational fears and how they are classified. The general fears and all we might have seen in the last talk. Now we will take up some the irrational fears or unreasonable fears, or the automatic fears. In that way also they call for those irrational fears, which are also called as phobias. In general term also they call it as phobias, and in technical, that is a technical term for those intense, irrational, automatic fears. They call it as phobias. We'll see something about these phobias also. Nowadays, those phobias are becoming more and more predominant in the world. And why the predominance of these phobias are seen in the world, and again, how to handle them to some extent. From all these three approaches, the scientific approach, the religious approach, and the right view approach. All these three approaches also we will see. Okay, so that is today's talk. Now coming to this scientific approach towards these different fears, and how they classify these fears. So, of course, all of us, we have some or the other fear. The very human life is like one of the lower realms. Here, the happiness is also relatively less, and the courage is also relatively less. Once we become more matured, say our minds are more evolved, more pure, more subtle, like in the realms of divine beings or in the realms of Brahmic beings, then the courage levels are also high because the attachment levels are less. So attachment and fear, they go together. The higher the attachment with greed, hatred, and delusion, higher is the fear. In the human realm, the attachments are relatively higher, and in the above human realm, like in the divine realms and the Brahmic realms, the attachments are relatively less, thereby, because of that reason, the fears are also less. And if you go a little lower realms, like the animal world and all, the fears are more intense there. Each and every moment they are scared of the predating animals or some other natural problems or some basic instincts like the hunger and say uh, yeah, to get proper food, they have to struggle hard, and how to avoid from the predating animals. For that also they have to have that fear. So generally, the animal realm is renowned for this defilement of fear, just like this hungry ghost realm is renowned uh, for greed, for craving. The animal world is for fear. The Titanic world or this Asuric realm, it is for the hatred. Always they resist, they fight, they quarrel, they hate each other, they hate one another in this demonic world or this Titanic world, Asura world or Rakshas or Asuric world. And in the hellish realms, which is the lowest of all the realms, there all these three are there. And greed is also very much predominant. Hatred is also very much predominant. Fear is also very predominant. But in the animal realms, fear is very much predominant. And of course, the human realm is not very, very far from the animal world and compared to the divine realms and the Brahmic realms. Because of that reason, because of attachment, because of course, the defilements. Attachment again is rooted in ignorance, the delusion and ignorance. The more and more clear about the nature, clear about the body, clear about how to let go these things, then your fears also will reduce. If your clarity is less, then fears will definitely increase. That way, everything is rooted finally in the ignorance only. Hmm? Even your fears, though they look like they're rooted in attachment, again, the attachment is rooted in ignorance only. So, in that way, that is one right view approach to look at the fears, but we will see a right view approach little later. Now, we will take up this scientific approach or the medical approach or psychological approach of these fears and how they define these fears and how they define the phobias and what are the classification of these fears or phobias and how anxiety and the fear are related and how what are the medical approaches or the psychological approaches to handle these different kinds of phobias. Just for a few minutes we will see. And of course there are so many lot of research is going on from all parts of the world, different parts of the world, and so many psychologists and these people involved in the medicos who are involved in this fear psychosis. They have derived their own ways and means to identify the fears, to find out the causes for the fears, and to classify the fears, to find out the solutions of those fears. So there are so many approaches that we just take up one approach to understand this scientific, say, understanding, a psychological understanding of these fears. So how they say define the fears and how they define the phobias and of course as I was telling, they debilitate. The fears will debilitate. They prevent people from living the whole life, the full life and the whole life. Living fully is not possible if we are handicapped by these different kinds of fears. It's called debilitating, or causing them to create a routine focused on avoiding the triggers of the fears. Always you are careful, you are over careful to avoid the different triggers that trigger the fear in your mind. For example, if you have the fear of heights, you always try to avoid how not to enter into a place where that height problem is there. So in that way, always it will handicap you. It will prevent you to lead your life fully. That is a horrible thing with the fears. Always they feel they are in some life-threatening ecosystem, and that will always have some pricking or some pressure or some oppression that will inhibit you to lead your life fully. That is the problem of these fears and phobias. Okay, now coming to the 10 major kinds of phobias. What is the difference between fears and phobias that we will see? Last time, of course, we have seen the general fears. And those fears, if they are like automatic, if they become automatic, then it becomes a phobia. To make the things much more clear between the fears and phobias. Fears, the causes are known a little bit. Many of the fears, you know the cause to some extent. And the solution also you know to some extent. Well, some ideas you have and some techniques you practice to come out of the fears. But a phobia, the causes you know, like the fear of animals, let us say fear of snakes, fear of dogs, say fear of heights. The cause you know, the cause is the animal, the cause is the height, the cause is the darkness, you know. But the cure, completely you are unaware. How to come out of it, completely you are unaware. So in that way, the phobia, and it is like it has become like one, so say it becomes like automatic. When you enter into that kind of situation where the cause is very much clear, but it becomes like one subconscious thought provokes, and it secretes some chemical, and that creates some sensations, and then you respond to that sensation, that chemical, that thought, again automatically, and again you develop the same fear again and again, and you get trapped into that vicious cycle of fear without knowing how to come out of that situation, how to come out of that fear trap. And that is what is called automatic fear, or subconscious fear, or unreasonable fear, or irrational fear. And that is what is a phobia, where though the cause is very clear, but you don't know any solution, any say door to escape from from that fear, or that trap of that fearful thought, and that chemical that secretes in the mind because of that fear, and that produces some sensations in the body, and again you react to that sensations and those chemicals and those thoughts again in a fearsome way, and again the same routine will continue, the same cycle will continue, and that kind of irrational fear which becomes automatic, it is called a phobia. And now of course there are so many kinds of hundreds of phobias are seen in the world, some very peculiar kind of phobias. Some people are fear of even the currency notes. That kind of phobias or fears are also started developing in the world. The fear of say even some kind of bananas. I have seen. I was just going through fear of bananas, banana phobia. Fear of blood and all these things. Of course, they were there. So in that way, these irrational fears, you don't know the actual the actual cause. You don't know, and how it's originated. You don't, and the cure also you don't. The situation you know, because of this situation I get this fear, you know. But actual origination, how it originated in my mind, that you don't know, that you can't trace back, that you can't find out. And the cure also you can't find out. So that kind of trap of this fear. And when it continues, then it becomes anxiety. So fear and anxiety, if you don't know the origin of it and you don't know the cure of it, then it becomes a phobia. Okay, so that is about the definition of phobia. And then what are the different kinds of phobia? Before going into that, so we will see how these people, they're trying to find out the origin of this phobia, but they're not very sure. So one theory is that humans have a genetic predisposition to some kind of fears and phobias. Because what is that? What does it mean? Because their ancestors, their parents, they have, their forefathers, they have this fear, and that has come to our genes also. Through hereditary, we get this. So let us say if my forefathers have the fear of snakes, then I will also get the fear of snakes in that way. But that is not very clear. It is not at all proved properly. And some people say it is the influence of the surroundings. If you're continuously under the influence or in the association of people having such kind of fears or phobias, then that will be induced to you also. So let us say if in your surroundings, neighbors and the society, many people are scared of snakes, then you will also automatically get induced by that fear of snakes. That is also one of the theories. But that is also not very apt. That is also not very apt reason for the origination or the arising of the fears in the human minds. Then comes your one more theory that they talk about is some traumatic experience. You have gone through some, say, traumatic experience of something. Say, you went through, you have encountered a snake, and it has created a tremendous scare in your mind. And because of that trauma, let us say, or if you are bitten by a snake, let us say, that is also possible. Then you develop tremendous fear towards the snake. That is also very rare, and that also will not correctly explain the reason for these fears and phobias. And then there is one more reason, one more point the people say about the arising of fears and phobias is like the very nature. It's called one kind of personality trait. It is called neuroticism. Mm. They're susceptible to this kind of fears and phobias. That very design of the mind and the body is susceptible to fears and phobias. That is one of the reasons for fears and phobias. In that way, also some people define. So that kind of neuroticism, that kind of personality trait, which is like very much inbuilt in your personality. So that kind of neuroticism is the cause for developing a phobia. That means you're susceptible to that kind of thinking, that kind of say analysis, that kind of nature has built up in your mind. So because of that reason, because of that neuroticism, you develop phobias. In that way, also they say, but that is also not a proper explanation. So all these psychologists or the medicals, they don't have any say understanding in deriving the proper reason. Among all these reasons, they maybe to some extent 1%, 2% they may be true, but they don't satisfy everyone to find out the cause of the fears and phobias. Because of some overprotective parents, also the children will develop a lot of fears. Overprotective, always they think that the parents are there, and that's why they don't develop their own ability, courage to face the situations. And such children also, they may develop a lot of fears and phobias. That's also one of the explanation, but that is also not absolutely correct. And some kind of abuse that children undergo at their young age, losing a parent, losing some very close relative, those kinds of things also may develop some fears and phobias. To some extent, they're all okay. They explain the reason for developing phobias and fears, but none of them, they won't give the complete picture about the origination of fears and phobias. And because of this neuroticism and also all these different factors that create fears and phobias, the mind will develop the pathways of fears in the brain or in the mind. Let us say they develop the pathways of fears. Once you expose to that kind of ecosystem, automatically those pathways of fears will open up, and you fall into the trap of fears, the vicious cycle of fears. So in that way, these fears and phobias, they create these pathways in the brain. Pathways means like some chemical will be produced in the brain, and that will flow in a proper pattern, and those things will create proper some kind of sensations, and you are stuck in that pathway. Okay, so in that way they define the uh, origination or creation of fears and phobias. Hmm. And now coming to the different kinds of fears, hmm, or phobias, the irrational fears. So then it gives little more idea about the present day different fears and phobias. The most common phobia in the world is the social phobia. Also, it's also known as social anxiety. So what does it mean? So this type of phobia covers a broad range of situations in which people are afraid to interact with others because they fear what they fear. They fear judgment, what the other people will think about my way of talking, my way of behaving, my way of some acting, moving of my body, sitting, everything. They judge before the others judge, and they develop some kind of fear. They start judging about others' judgment, and they develop fear towards any kind of sociability. They don't. They avoid being with the people. People that suffer from social anxiety can have difficulty presenting in front of colleagues, speaking in public, going to parties, or just chatting with others. You might be surprised to learn that social anxiety affects as many as 12%, but sufferers often don't seek therapy because it would require social contact again. You see, hmm, so again, they don't want to approach the doctors or other people, and they don't share this social anxiety again because that sharing is like again because of the anxiety, again because of the fear that sharing again is judged by the people. So in that way they get trapped into that vicious cycle, hmm, of developing this social anxiety and avoiding to share this social anxiety with other people, with the society, or any even the right person also, again with that fear of meeting and opening up yourself with the people. So this is one of the major fears in the world. In almost all say generations, it is very much there. This social anxiety, it is very much deep rooted. So there are so this counseling and some kind of say exposing them to some kind of religious programs, if not the public parties or social programs, encouraging them to the religious programs. So many ways they try to come out of this kind of social anxiety and social phobia. But one right view approach for this social anxiety, social phobia that I always used to tell, not always in the specific situations where the need arises, like when we discuss about the metta, when we discuss about practicing Shila Vishuddhi, and so there. Uh, so that the truthfulness aspect is lacking in you, hiding, covering, masking, pretending, being hypocrite. mm, there is no coherence in your thinking, in your speech, in your actions, the physical actions, verbal actions, and mental actions. If the coherence is there, then then you don't have metta also. You don't have loving kindness in your feelings, in your awareness, in your confidence. Again, there is no coherence. Hmm? So what happens? So then you can't practice Shila also properly, and then you your metta also will not develop properly. Hmm. Your truthfulness also will not be there, because the main reason is that truthfulness. The main reason that coherence. You have become the prey, victim of this covering, masking, pretending, thinking something inside and acting mm, in an opposite way. So, if you don't appreciate the beauty of truthfulness or honesty, which is the which is the pulling force of all other moral precepts, if that is not there, if you have not understood that, then you don't have right view again. And that kind of wrong view of pretending, masking, and all these things, that will make you to develop some kind of subconscious fears. And those subconscious fears will lead to so many kinds of phobias like this, phobias like your social anxiety, or the social phobia, the phobia of sociability. So because of that reason, I was telling you in this Vishuddhi Magga course also, in the benefits of metta, in the benefits of truthfulness. So what I was telling you, the person who is practicing the Shila properly, of not to lie, not to cheat, not to say uh, deceive the partner, not to kill, not to take intoxicants. At least these five precepts, a person is practicing with firm conviction, truthfully, and with little bit of right view. He is practicing. Then he is not afraid of, say, going and talking in any kind of assemblies, whether it's assembly of intelligent people, warrior people, innocent people, whatever it may be. He is completely, he is he is not affected by the groups and the people. So that kind of uh, clarity and conviction and confidence is seen with the person who is practicing Shila with some right view, with some truthfulness. If a person is practicing Shila, then this sociability issues, or this social fears, or this social anxiety, it can be easily handled. That's what is the power of the Shilas and forms. And even the generosity. The person who is generous is also not afraid of meeting people, because there is no fear of reproaching or judgment like from the people. Some kind of appreciation is always there towards a generous person, towards a person who is good in charity and generosity, and that giving nature is there. Such a person, again, he need not be scared of people. Person who is stingy, he will be definitely scared of people, and he develops this social anxiety. In that way, these punya kriyas have like Shila, Dhana, and respecting the respectables. Again, it will make you to fit into that hierarchy, protection from the say wise people, virtuous people, elderly people. That inner protection, the feeling of protection will be there. In that way, uh, though the other religions, to some extent, with some belief system, with some faith, they try to promote these punya kriyas. But if you rationalize them, if you understand them with more rationality, with more right view, then it becomes a more powerful tool to come out of this kind of social anxiety. And if you practice all these punya kriyas, then your social anxiety will definitely reduced, it can be removed. Then, coming to the next phobia, uh, fear of heights Hmm. Between 3 to 6% of people, they suffer from a fear of heights. This is one more very predominant fear that has become more and more prominent nowadays in the world. Hmm. Some species, some races like these Native Americans, and of course the native people of any country, they generally have relatively less fear towards these heights. But if you become more and more modern and more sophisticated, this fear of heights is also slowly increasing among the different communities in the world. So it means like they have to avoid any place high up and can have vertigo, and they need to hold on to something when going upwards, even just on a flight of stairs at a theme park. So in that way, this fear of heights is also uh, it's a predominant one of the major fears, and they're becoming like phobias also. They're becoming too intense, too irrational. They're becoming phobias also. And another fear, which is again more predominant, which is close to this fear of heights, is the fear of flying. Fear of flying. Again, the whooping 40% of the global population is affected by this fear of flying. 40%, you just see, just imagine, 40% of the people have this fear of flying. And of course, it has become a chronic problem among 2.5 or 2.5% of the people all over the world. This fear of flying, it's again because of uh, the heights only. That is one of the main reasons. And also a little more things with regard to that movement in the heights. That is also one of the reasons for this fear of heights. Of course, that will also hamper, that will also disrupt people's movement, and people's goals, and so many things, travel and all. And that is also again increasing this fear of heights and fear of flying in this modern present world. Then one more prominent fear is the fear of, and how to handle this. And again, the scientific world, it is innocent of the ways and means to handle this fear of heights. And even the religious approaches, so many religious approaches are also, they're they're not sure how to handle this fear of heights. But there is only one right view approach, and of course again the meditative approach to come out of this fear of heights. It's because again lot of attachment to the body only we develop this fear of heights. When this body falls down from the height or from flying, then we lose this body. That because of that strong attachment to the body is the main reason for the fear of heights. And how to come out of it? Again, we have to learn how to make this body very subtle, very light. And of course, that is possible maybe in some advanced meditation practices that you have taken up in this right view approach. Also, when the mind is completely suffused with light and when it becomes very light, that lightness and the light and the delight when you experience. When you are losing body, you are experiencing happiness. Please understand. I repeat this. When you are losing body, by developing, by purifying the mind and suffusing the body with the light, and automatically it happens. That in that process, when you are losing the body, losing this solid body, the solidity of the body, and the substituting with the lightness and the brightness and the delight, when you're losing the body, when you are becoming lighter and lighter, when you're experiencing more and more delight, then the attachment to the body, the solidity of the body will reduce. Then you start enjoying flying. Then you start enjoying going up. The more grass you become to this, the more grass your attachment to the body, attachment to this grass body, stronger the attachment to the grass body, then you want to confine yourself to the lower levels, the ground levels. When your attachment to the body becomes like say when it start diminishing, reducing, then you feel like flying. You just feel like escaping from this ground levels. And that is possible, that is authoritatively possible when you practice this light meditation or any casino meditation that I was introducing in the Shuddhi Mudra program also. And of course, in some meditation programs also, I was introducing different kasinas. There you experience how to transcend from this body, how to make this body light, subtle, and in that process, how you derive the lightness of the body and the brightness in the body and the delight in the mind, the freedom in the mind, and in that kind of mentality, that kind of subtleness of the mind, then this fear of heights and the fear of flying, they will take backseat. They will start disappearing. Please understand this. This is only approach to come out of these fears. There are no other religious approaches, and there are no other medical approaches to come out of this fear of heights and fear of flying, other than say lightening your body with this light meditation or this mind purification. So many techniques. The body also gets lightened and brightened, and then you develop delight along with these things. Then your attachment to this gross body will reduce. Then there will be no fear of heights and fear of flying. So please understand this. I know those who are already into this path. So that is the approach. Now coming to the next important fear, which is again there is a possibility of that to become a phobia, like the fear of other animals like snakes, bugs, spiders. Spiders and bugs is relatively less in India, but of course in Western countries it is very much there. That's what people say. But the fear of snakes is very much there all over the world. The fear of these crawling animals like the snakes, because of so many stories that are there in all cultures of the world about the snakes, and because of that very nature of the movement of the snakes, which is completely different from the movement of human beings, maybe because of so many reasons. There is this fear of snakes and some of these animals all over the world. Animal-based phobias. They're called animal-based phobias, like this arachnophobia, fear of spiders, this entomophobia, fear of insects. That way, there are so many phobias they talk about, and they give so many names also. But we will see all these animal-based phobias, and the fact these animals are so different from mammals is a major reason for this strong aversion. Yeah, as I was telling you, their movement, their nature, their features are different from the human beings, completely different from the human beings, like these snakes and all. That may be one thing. And because of their venomous nature, and because of their some kind of, like say, they are very grudgeful, they are very revengeful, some of these animals like snakes. That is also one kind of thinking towards the snakes. And because of the venom they contain, like in spiders, some venomous spiders, not in the snakes, and this scorpions. Because of that venomous thing, and people have developed some kind of irrational fears towards these animals. So in that way, this is also becoming one of the predominant fears, not only in the present generation, from the time immemorial. This fear of these animal-based phobias, fear of the animals is very much there. And what is the approach? The scientific approach, they say, of course, just to expose that kind of situation, just to be with such kind of animals. If you are a little bit scared of snakes, let us say, then you should try to touch in so many of these snake charmers and all. So snakes without those venomous teeth, they try to bring them, try to touch them, try to be with them, try to face that kind of situation with some safety measures. Then you can come out of, you can start, your mind will start reasoning about, correctly reason out through experience, through practical experience. Then automatically you can come out of that kind of fears. That's what they say. And then the religious approach is like They simply glorify the nature of such kind of ferocious animals into they give some divine qualities to such ferocious animals. Then you develop some kind of devotion. So that will also reduce your fear. That is one religious approach. And of course, the right view approach is the metta, the karuna, all these right view feelings like metta, karuna, mutta, upekka. They will also make your say your reproach, your resistance to that kind of animals will reduce, and then you will become like more confident that by developing your mind, by coming out of your reacting mind towards that kind of animals, it is more my reaction rather than the actual situation. That knowledge will start developing in your mind, and then your fear towards such animals will reduce. That's what we practice in the metta meditation. So if it becomes quite intense, quite clear, quite deep rooted, the practice of metta, karuna, mutta, upekka, go deep into our psyche by regular practicing this with proper understanding, then we can come out of this fear of animals to a great extent. That is the right view approach. The religious approach is dignifying those animals also. And the psychological approach or the medical approach is to create some kind of artificial say, circumstances of interacting with them with some proper safety measures. If you create and you encounter such animals and be with them, then that is a scientific approach. That way we can come out of this fear of animals and this mainly the fear of snakes. And of course in the West it is the fear of spiders and bugs and all these things also. Now coming to the next one, the next important fear is the fear of the dark. The fear of the dark, this is also very much common, especially among the kids. Of course, it will follow in many people into their adult lives also. When they become adults also, it will follow in many cases. Despite its name, that is the fear of the dark, it is not just the dark, but it is like we can't see lurking in the shadows because we don't know, because of the ignorance, because of not knowingness in the dark. That is one of the main reasons for the fear of dark. Because you don't know, you don't see. When you see, there is clarity. In the dark, they don't see, then there will be no clarity. Again, the root is not knowing, not having clarity. Again, ignorance. But not knowingness is the cause here again for the fear of dark. Okay. So, and in many cases of this fear of dark, there are some lot of traumatic experiences and is influenced by the fact that many tragic scenarios and scenes from horror films play out in places with little to no light. Many horrifying things that we see in movie or in imagination or in practical situation, they happen when there is no much proper light. So because of that reason also, subconsciously it has entered into our psyche and it has created some kind of fear towards this not knowingness in the darkness. So because of that reason, we develop this fear of darkness. So these people, they always stay in a constant state of alertness, too much alertness, or too much dependence on the light. So they develop and they feel a lot of discomfort when the lights are off. So that means like say anything that they can't see, that they can't tolerate, that they can't face that kind of situation. But again, what is the approach here? The right view approach is like meditation. When you're closing your eyes, going inwards, trying to work on your minds, noting the minds, noting the breaths, noting the sensations, noting the other objects like sounds and all. In the dark only, you are doing all these things, but your mind is learned how to be with these different objects Though your eyes are closed, though you are not seeing the light, but still you are seeing all these other things from the other physical senses and from the mind sense, and you are exploring the mind sense more and more authoritatively. Then all these fears about the darkness will go away in any meditation practice. It's not just the right view meditations, in any meditation, even the subjective meditation, even in the other religious meditations also, this fear of darkness will go away in a very authoritative way. Then the next fear is the fear of getting a disease. Of course, it became very predominant after this COVID. People become, say, too sensitive and develop fears of getting infected, getting a disease. And they get preoccupied with cleanliness, to avoid the spread of the germs. Where the fear of diseases means fear of the germs. We don't know where it is, and that's why over cleanliness or fear of everything, fear of touching everything, fear of interacting with everyone, with everything. So that has become much predominant nowadays, especially after this COVID. It's important to take care of your health, of course, but those that suffer from this fear often don't leave home at all. They restrict to one place, they don't leave that place. Again, one of the main reasons is fear of getting exposed to this kind of germs when they go out. So in that kind of way, again, it will debilitate them, it will make them handicapped to move around freely. And of course, again, it comes under this group of good fears. It's like little precautionary things with some care. If it becomes irrational, then it's bad fear. With some precaution, with some reasoning, if you take some precautions, then it becomes a good fear. So then comes, but in many cases it has become irrational. Because of that reason, they have classified this under these fears and phobias. And what is the approach again? The scientific approach: understand the situation, and adopt this moderation, middle paths. To some extent, of course, you have to maintain cleanliness. Beyond some extent, there is no need to be too much bothered. So that way, adopting this middle path approach. This is also very, very important to handle a lot of issues, lot of fears, lot of phobias. The person with this middle path approach or this moderation approach, and finally the moderation and middle path and even the morality finally end up in mindfulness. So I will come to that point maybe at the end of this talk. Finally, it is the mindfulness that is the master key. Whether you are taking up the scientific approach or the medical approach to handle fears, or whether you are taking up religious approach, or whether you are taking right view approach. So it is your right view mindfulness should be there in all these approaches. Then you can authoritatively start fixing all these fears and phobias. Just like when we are discussing about the different addictions, how these right view mindfulness, the authoritative right view mindfulness, not just your awareness mindfulness or your observation. It is your emotional mindfulness, whether it is your confidence mindfulness, whether it is your analytical mindfulness. So that will become an authoritative mindfulness. If you start applying this authoritative mindfulness as you are learning in this right view approach, all these four faculties, when you start developing, how you can start developing all these four kinds of mindfulness also, four kinds of awareness also when you are developing, then that will fix all kinds of fears in a more authoritative, in a more comprehensive way. That kind of right view mindfulness should be brought into even this medical approach also. And if you are a religious person, this authoritative mindfulness should be brought into your religious practices also. This moderation, and the mindfulness and morality, all these things, they go together. When you bring in this mindfulness, then automatically you will bring in moderation and middle path and morality also. In the right amounts you bring in. And then your religious practice becomes more authoritative, more fruitful in handling the fears. And your medical practices also will become more fruitful in handling the fears and phobias. If you bring in this mindfulness and the middle path. Okay. So this point you keep in your mind, definitely it will help. Then the fear of blood also. This is one more thing that is very much seen, of course, again from time immemorial. The people, of course, in the ancient times, maybe it was relatively less because the people were more violent in compared to the present generation. But when the people were becoming more and more civilized, more and more mild, more and more say sensitive, then this fear of blood is also becoming say one of the important fears. So, like when somebody is bleeding, when there is some injury, this fear of blood is 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 seen among people, and also it leads to the fear of death. The fear of blood somehow sometimes it connects to the fear of death also. Because of that reason, the fear of blood is also becoming one of the important fears and the phobia also. And also there are some old ideas and old sayings. They say it's not a big deal unless it's bleeding. That means when there is a bleeding, it becomes a big deal. In that way, they relate the bleeding with the seriousness of the problem. So if there is a bleeding, then it is serious. In that way, that notion has been induced into the human minds. Because of that reason, bleeding has created some kind of fear, some kind of stigma, some fear in the mind. So because of that reason, people are fear of blood, and they relate it to the severity of the problem, and they relate it to even to the death also. Then how to come out of it? Again, the authoritative way is developing all these different stepping back techniques, the mindfulness techniques of how to step back from the body or the body senses by practicing all these sense awareness meditations. Then you develop a lot of detachment to the body. Then once this Asubha meditation, the Kayagathanusati, like contemplating different body parts, an objective way, objective observation of the body parts, body senses, body sense objects. When you are developing in this, through this right through meditations and right through mindfulness, then your fear of blood, fear of death also. That is one more important fear that will start reducing. Like this, with the contemplation techniques also, awareness of these body parts, body senses, body sense object is one thing, and even the contemplation of the inevitability of death, contemplation of the body parts like Asubhanusati meditation, the right contemplation, the right perception of the body, the impermanence of the body, the foulness, the dirtiness of the body. These things, if you start contemplating, as you have learned in this perception meditations, then your attachment to the body, attachment to the body parts like the blood and all, it will come down. Then your fear and phobia, it will start reducing. Okay. So then comes the fear of violent weather. This was very much predominant from the time immemorial, but in the recent days, it's relatively less, the recent present generation. In the ancient days, that's how many religions also started. A lot of worshipping and devotion also started. And even some religions also started because of this fear of the natural phenomena. In the ancient days, some lightning was there, they get shocked because such a huge lightning which covers the entire sky sometimes, and the huge sound, the huge rain, sometimes earthquakes, sometimes volcanoes. These things are so huge, these violent weather conditions. So they automatically they create a lot of fears, and that kind of violent weather or the climatic condition, they lead to some other fears of like some fear of unknown started from there, and from there, of course, some rightful spirited religion started. Some again, some other say very irrational religious beliefs also started, which led to some other kinds of fears. So in that way, you can say this fear of violent weather is also one of the predominant fears, which led to so many kinds of religious fears also. Then how to come out of it? Then again, of course, the science is also helping us to understand the weather. So in that way also, this fear of the weather, violent weather is reducing. And also, the right view approach about this unknown, the so-called unknown, like this approach that you are practicing, like not to take up these extreme views of not worrying about who is this unknown, who created this this existence, this violent fearless, violent weather and all. Instead of worrying about those things, or instead of simply stuck with these bodily things, once start working about the mental peace, mental calmness, mental purity, taking up this middle path approach of avoiding the extremes of unknown and extremes of the very known, like the body, not stuck in these two extremes, and started working on this mind and started deriving the clarity in the mind, purity in the mind. Again, that will help us to come out of this kind of irrational fears about the unknown and the violent weather and all these things. Then coming to the fear of death, the fear of death is the last important fear that they discuss. And again, it is because of the fear of unknown, the fear of not knowing what will happen after giving up this body. And again, if you have some kind of comprehension about this law of cause and effect, how this the flow of mind happens even after this giving up of the body, how the good begets good, bad begets bad, how this law of attraction is working in the world. If a little bit of comprehension if you have, and again if you are practicing this right view mindfulness of how to step back from this body and observe the body as body, the senses as senses, body parts as body parts, and how they are all impermanent, and how they are oppressive, and how they are repulsive, how they don't contain anything like the permanent self. All these things that we are learning in this right view meditations, you are learning this correctly and comprehending them authoritatively, then the fear of death also, it will go away. That letting go you will learn. This art of letting go, either with confidence and developing this confidence building techniques, or with awareness, or with proper right feelings, or with right analytical mind, right perceptions. You develop this art of letting go more authoritatively, and automatically all these fears also you can let go. All these phobias also, all these compulsive, consistent thoughts. All these, after all these things are consistent, compulsive thoughts, that's all. Whether it's a fear, or whether it's an anxiety, or whether it is an addiction also. But that is more like one attachment, wanting thought, addiction. Though a part of the mind is resisting it, but these fears are little opposite of it. Though a part of your mind is, say, uh, say, though much part of your mind is resisting it, but deep inside, you can't give it up. You can't give up that thought. So that way, that continuity of the same thought is there in all these psychological problems, and and that continuity is also there. That consistency is also there, and unnecessarily reacting to it and making it into a vicious trap is also there. All these, whether it is fears or phobias, or whether it is temptations and addictions also. Same pattern of the thoughts, continuity pattern of the thoughts we can see in all these the psychological problems. Hmm. But to break this continuity, the only means is mindfulness. If you have this right view approach to all kinds of mindfulness, especially these four kinds of mindfulness you develop from developing these four faculties of the mind, then that very mindfulness will again and again will hit and break this continuity of these thought processes, whether it is a fear thought process or whether it is a temptation or addiction thought process. In both these things, you see that continuity only, and you can break that continuity only by practicing this awareness, mindfulness, or this feeling mindfulness, or this confidence mindfulness, or this proper logical mindfulness, or this analytical mindfulness. So, work on all these things authoritatively, correctly, enthusiastically, joyfully. Then, slowly, we can conquer all these kinds of fears and phobias, bit by bit, depending on the intensity at which you are practicing these rightful things, and your how much intelligently you are practicing, how much faithfully you are practicing, how much support you are getting from the people who have progressed in this practice. All these things will matter, but definitely you'll progress if you start on these lines. And of course, again from April, we have this series of this right to mindfulness training programs. You can encourage other people also, and you can also participate and establish in this right to mindfulness, which is the only master key, the only powerful key and master key to disrupt this continuous thought process of either fears or phobias or even the temptations and addictions. In all these psychological aberrations, psychological problems, this is the master key that you keep in your mind. And you have the opportunity also in the month of April to learn these things authoritatively. Okay. So that is about our discussion on this good fears and bad fears, the second part. And again, coming to these good fears, just some 2-3 minutes. As I was telling you, uh, this moral fears to do immoral things. That is a good fear. You should have some fear to do some immoral things, by doing which you will be punished. If that kind of fear you have, then it's like it's your protector. It will safeguard you. By stealing, I will be punished by the government. If you have that fear of punishment, then it will protect you. So then that is a good fear, and there is no problem with such kind of fears, and rather you should nurture such fears. And again, the root of this good fears is, or this moral fears is the moral shame. What is that moral shame? Deep inside, as a human being, as a so and so person, it is unbecoming for me to indulge in this kind of immoral action, indulge in lying, indulge in stealing, indulge in say sexual misconduct, indulging in taking intoxicant. It is unbecoming. It is so cheap for me that the pricking that happens from inside, that will also protect you. And its other version, other side is like the people also will will rebuke me and the government will punish me. So that kind of fear also is there along with this moral shame. Moral fear is also there. So that combination of moral fear and moral shame, it's a good fear. One should cultivate, one should nurture those good fears. then that will make you a great person, great individual. Not forget about great individual. You will become a happy person. You will become free person. You will become an intelligent person. So in that way, cultivating these good fears is also important. By understanding what is good, what is bad. So the bad gives me suffering. The bad gives me, say, suffering here and now and suffering hereafter also. That kind of comprehension also, if you get, then you understand the greatness, the importance of these good fears, the moral fears. Of course, in many discourses, I might have told about this Hiri Uttapa, the good fears. Say, and they are called the Lokapalaka Dhammas. Like, so if each and every individual, of course, to some extent, everyone will have this moral shame and moral fear. Because of that only, they are behaving like humans. Otherwise, they would have behaved like like horrible people, like demons. So one should nurture those kind of moral fears. Okay, that is about the good fears. Maybe some other time we can take up in detail. Or already, I think we might have covered about this Hiri Ottappa, about these good fears, the moral fears. But I think today this much is enough. There are some fears which will protect you, and such fears you should nurture, you should practice. Then you will grow as a human being, and also you will grow spiritually also, both worldly and spiritually. You can grow if you understand and nurture these moral fears, which are the good fears. Okay, so with that, we conclude. And as usual, if you have some quick questions, you can ask, and then we will conclude. Vandami Bantheji, previous birth's point of view, is there possibility that in previous births we might have come across some situations which developed fear, phobia, vipaka of previous birth karma? That's all. That is the question. So previous birth's point of view, is there possibility that in previous births we might have come across some situations which developed fear, phobia, vipaka of previous birth? Yes, there are some phobias, fears, which are the consequences of your accumulated karma of the previous birth. There are, but again, you can't say that that is the only reason. Just like we were trying to explore the reason for fears and phobias, your genetics, your the fears induced by the people around you. All those fears are there, and this is also one of the important things, that is from your previous life also, some accumulated bad karma, accumulated fear, that there is a possibility of that fear to get say again exposed or expressed in this life. There is something called hypnotic regression and past life therapy. Even in the psychological therapy also, if you have some irrational fear that you can't, you're completely debilitated by that irrational fear in this life, there's no cure in all possible ways, then the people will hypnotize such people. Some masters can hypnotize such people, and they can go to that previous life and they can see, re-experience that situation where that fear has been inflicted into your stream of consciousness. When you again start re-experiencing that, then you start understanding that situation properly. Then there are higher chances of coming out of that fear. So there is one case study where one child in this life, no, not child, one lady in this life, in her previous life she was a child, And when she was swimming, she was attacked by one crocodile and she lost her leg, or she developed tremendous pain in her knee. But now, when she is a lady now, and she was a doctor actually, and whenever she wants to take some steps, she used to develop tremendous pain in her knees. Medically, there was no reason at all, and of course, this is not like one fear, but automatically it became a fear in her mind. She developed some kind of fear towards that. For climbing, for walking, also she developed some fear because she thought that it will get a tremendous pain in her knee. So then, in this past life regression, in this past life therapy and hypnotic regression, then she could experience how that fear has entered into her mind, and that experiencing of pain. Thereby, she developed the fear of even to climb small things, which will create a lot of pain in her knee. So that it is because that her previous life's experience, where she was affected, she was attacked by a crocodile at her knee, and she developed tremendous pain. That's like one trauma that she faced in the previous life, and it's after effect vipaka. She is experiencing same trauma, same fear in this life also. In that way, sometimes it will be your previous life also that will be the cause of your present day fear, present life fear. Good morning, Banteji. If you are susceptible to phobias, if that is what inbuilt in our personality, apart from right view, anything else that suggests to support, please. Yeah. So if it is inbuilt and it has like completely encroached us, it has completely overtaken us, then again it depends on what kind of phobia. So as I was explaining these different 10 kinds of phobia and the different ways of handling those 10 kinds of phobia in different ways, in the religious way. And again, it depends on your temperament. If you are not like of that temperament, if you're not a religious person, then the religious approach will not be suitable for you to come out of your phobia. And again, if you are that medical approach, again, it may not fit into a person like say who is more religiously inclined. Depending on the nature of the phobia, depending on the nature of the person, depending on the temperament of the person, the different approaches one can adopt to come out of that specific phobia. And as I was telling you, it is the very patient, very faithful dependence on mindfulness, the right view mindfulness, especially in an authoritative way. Sometimes it will work in all cases. It will work in all cases, let's say whether you're a religious person or a medical person or a scientific person. So if you bring in this idea of right view and this mindfulness into your therapeutic system, into your approach of handling that phobia, sooner or later it will have an impact. So because of that reason, so this integrated approach, not simply I want to understand about this phobia, I want to come out of some technique, intelligent technique only, I want to come out of this phobia. So if that is your attitude to handle that phobia, to understand that phobia, then you are a failure. You have to plunge into the experiential aspect of it. Even the mindfulness is that experience. Mindfulness is not just one understanding. Mindfulness is experience. Your mind is fully into that situation, that moment, that experience. So in that way, only you can break that continuity of that thought process of that particular phobia. In that way, So I can tell you again authoritatively, it is the mindfulness that is the master key to break this continuity of any thought process in any phobia. To develop the importance of this and accordingly start practicing this right mindfulness without say hesitation or without laziness or without overconfidence. I have understood mindfulness. There is no need for me to practice mindfulness means like gone. Then it will not yield any results for you. It's not just understanding mindfulness that is important. It is practicing mindfulness that is important. And the next important is practicing right view mindfulness with an integrated approach with all faculties of the mind. Simply I practice the mindfulness of breathing, I will be free from all my phobias. No. The practice simply the mindfulness of sensations, I will be free from. No. In an integrated way you practice, then there are higher chances coming out of phobias. And not only with the awareness, even with the feeling mindfulness, even with confidence mindfulness, even with this other perception mindfulness, like Asubha, Anicca, Anatta, Dukkha. That way you bring in that comprehensiveness in your mindfulness and that objectivity in your mindfulness, then automatically you develop that authoritativeness in mindfulness. Then step by step, bit by bit, one should not be too ambitious to come out of phobias. One should be more practical and skillful and patient. Then only one can come out of phobias correctly, authoritatively. So in that way, one should look into one's own temperament, one's own inclination, and thereby one should select all these medical approach, religious approach, right view approach as much as possible, and then bring in this integrity into this right view approach, and then this practicality, practicing regularly, continuity of practice is the success, is the key to success. So simply knowing will not help me. Let me put forth my effort and let me plunge into practice regularly. That attitude, if it is there, with devotion, with strong faith, then there are higher chances of coming out of the phobias. Vandami Banteji, please also explain about exam fear. What are Brahmic realm and divine realm? Can we see them? Please also explain about exam fear. Yeah. What is this exam fear? I'm planning to have one kind of interactive session with our, meditators and their children about the exams, exam fears and exams and something like that. A small session, maybe some 1 hour session. But of course, again, the key point here in exam fears also. They're thinking about the exam rather than preparing for the exam. That's why the fear comes, the exam fear comes. They're thinking about the result of the exam date and the exam time and the exam result, that they are thinking about rather than how to handle the exam, how to prepare for the exam. The preparation aspect of the exam is not there in their mind, but it is about the actual writing of the exam and the after effects or the results of the exam. If that has overtaken your mind, then you develop fear. If your thoughts are stretched to that future of the result of the exam, then only exam fear comes. For that matter, any fear comes. When the thought is stretched to the future, then only the fear comes. When the thought is like be in the present moment of what they're supposed to do, the task at the hand, the responsibility, the task at the hand is to learn this subject. You just learn it with complete will and with complete heart and soul into putting your heart and soul into the topic, the subject, and enjoy that. Just simply learn this art of letting go of the exam and the result of exam and plunge into this action of that particular task that is at your hand and enjoy it. That is the way to come out of the exam fear. Of course, there are so many ways and means to explain this in so many ways that can click the temperament of different students. So maybe after a few weeks, we will see that we can have a session on these exam fears and how to prepare for the exams with the students. Then they will get a lot of other insights also to handle this exam fear. The Brahmic realms and divine realms, this is a very big subject, and I used to explain here and there, bit here, bit there in different programs like Abhidhamma, Shuddhimagga, and Dhamma talks and all. There you can go through those things and you can comprehend. Again, to see them and feel them, you require the sensitivity of the mind, the concentration of the mind, the brightness of the mind, the purity of the mind. That's what is more important. Purifying the mind, concentrating the mind, developing the faculties of the mind, developing mindfulness, by developing stillness, by developing energy, by developing confidence. That way, working on the mind is important. That's what I insist in all my talks. I was talking about the ultimate realities in the Abhidhamma. So, of course, that's what all Buddhas also they do. Simply don't dream about these ultimate realities. Dream about these ultimate planes of existence. And if you can't comprehend with your intellectual mind, don't develop some kind of say disappointment or some kind of ego also. Or I can't comprehend it should not be there. That is one biggest ego that is seen in the so-called the modern so-called the scientific the intelligent people that they claim themselves. You can't see themselves, that doesn't mean that it is not there. So it requires different faculties of the mind sharpened. If you have weak mental faculties, then you can't see it and experience it. First, start working on the mind, start developing your mindfulness, your stillness, your concentration, your absorption. Then you can start penetrating into this different realms, different ultimate realities of these chittas, chetasikas, kalapas, dhatus, and all these things. And when you become more and more subtle and you know all these subtleties of the mind and matter, and then very authoritatively, if you can let go them, then automatically you end up in Nibbana. That is the path here. So what is the key takeaway that you should always remember? Developing my mind, purifying my mind is the key to realize all these knowledges, all this knowledge of the universe, knowledge of the planes, knowledge of the cosmos, knowledge of the ultimate realities. It is the means is my mind purification only. That awareness, if you have, that clarity you have, then all your abilities, all your energies, all your time should be focused on developing this mind purification through these different techniques. So there, if you focus, then you will realize all these realms, different realms. How to remove negative thoughts. So all these things that I am explaining, the fears, all these things are negative thoughts. And all these right view techniques and all these meditations are all about how to remove negative thoughts. Start practicing meditation, then you can remove negative thoughts. Start attending the meditation session, start understanding about the importance of these things. That is the way to remove negative thoughts. Once in a blue moon, some people appear and they start asking these kind of routine questions. So it is because of their priorities. They are simply carried away in the worldliness, and if you are not regularly be in touch with this try to do meditations, then you don't understand this very path and you don't understand these basic things also. And you ask these routine questions. Okay, any other question? So that is about good fears and bad fears. So if possible, maybe we can have one more part also, one more session also on this fears. If there is a need, we will see. So now we'll conclude with small chanting. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Bhavatu sabba mangalang rakkantu sabba devata. Sabba buddhanubhavena, sabba dhammanubhavena, sabba sanghanubhavena. Sada swati bhavantu te. Sukhi bhave yang nidduko. Ahang nicca ahang viya. Vidacha me sukhi hontu. Majhata chatavedino. Mam higammante dhamme. Satta hontu sukhi sada. Tato parancarajyesu. Chakkavale sujantano. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Sadhu, sukhi hontu. Mangal ho. May all of you be happy, healthy, and peaceful. May all beings also be happy. Sukhi hontu.